China built a dam so massive it actually slowed down Earth's rotation. You heard that right. One structure, made of concrete and steel, altered how fast our entire planet spins. But here's what makes this even more mind-bending. The dam holds back enough water to fill 200 million Olympic swimming pools. That's the equivalent of every single person on Earth owning 40 Olympic pools just from this one reservoir. Now you're probably wondering how that's even possible. And more importantly, how does moving water actually change the speed of a planet? That's exactly what we're about to uncover, because the physics behind this isn't just fascinating, it's genuinely unsettling. Let's start with the sheer scale of what China actually built. The engineering impossibility. You're standing on the Yangtze River in central China in the year 2006. What you're looking at defies everything engineers thought was possible just decades before. The Three Gorges Dam stretches before you, 2.3 kilometers long, nearly the length of 23 football fields placed end to end. You heard that right. And it towers 185 meters above the riverbed, which is taller than the Statue of Liberty, standing on top of a 15-story building. But the real shock comes when you try to comprehend what this structure actually does. It holds back 39.3 trillion cubic meters of water. That's an incomprehensible volume of liquid frozen behind a single wall of concrete. For perspective, if you tried to drain this reservoir using fire hoses, the kind that could fill an Olympic pool in seconds, it would take you over 3,000 years to empty it completely. You heard that right, 3,000 years of continuous draining, every single second of every single day, and you still wouldn't be finished. This wasn't supposed to exist. When engineers first proposed the Three Gorges Dam in the 1980s, the international engineering community called it impossible. The geological challenges were staggering. The Yangtze River is one of the most powerful and unpredictable rivers on Earth, and damming it at this particular location meant dealing with earthquakes, landslides, and water pressures that would make most engineers abandon the project before breaking ground. The construction challenges were equally brutal. You'd need to move 2 billion tons of earth and rock, coordinate hundreds of thousands of workers, and somehow maintain structural integrity while the river continued to rage around you. But China didn't just attempt it. They completed it. And when they finished, the dam generated 22.5 gigawatts of power, more electricity than any single hydroelectric facility on the planet. To put that in perspective, that's enough power to supply electricity to over 100 million people, entire cities powered by one structure. Factories, homes, hospitals, data centers, all drawing energy from the water trapped behind this concrete wall. The engineering feat was unprecedented. Workers had to pour concrete continuously for years. The dam required more material than the Great Wall of China. It cost roughly $37 billion, making it one of the most expensive infrastructure projects in human history, and it fundamentally reshaped the geography of an entire region. Where there was once a narrow, rushing river, there was now an artificial lake spanning over 400 miles upstream, swallowing villages, farmland, and entire towns beneath its surface. But here's what nobody expected when they finished pouring that last section of concrete and sealed the dam shut. The planet itself would notice. The moment they started filling that reservoir, something strange happened, something that wouldn't be fully understood until years later, when scientists analyzing the Earth's rotation stumbled upon an anomaly that nobody had anticipated. And that's when things got truly unsettling. The physics of a spinning planet. You need to understand something fundamental about how planets work. Earth is spinning constantly, relentlessly, completing one full rotation every 24 hours. But here's the thing that most people don't realize. The speed of that rotation isn't fixed. It can change, and it changes based on how mass is distributed across the planet's surface. Think of it like this. Imagine a figure skater spinning in place. When they pull their arms tight against their body, they spin faster. When they extend their arms outward, they spin slower. This is the principle of moment of inertia, the resistance an object has to changes in its rotational speed. The farther mass is from the center of rotation, the more it affects how fast that rotation occurs. Now apply that principle to Earth. When you take an enormous volume of water and move it from one place to another, especially when you lift it higher above sea level, you're fundamentally altering how mass is distributed across the planet. And when you alter that distribution, you change Earth's moment of inertia. You change how fast the planet spins. In 2011, a team of geophysicists published a study that shocked the scientific community. They had been analyzing precise measurements of Earth's rotation using satellite data and atomic clocks. What they discovered was that the filling of the Three Gorges Dam reservoir had measurably altered Earth's rotation rate. The planet had actually slowed down. But here's where it gets bizarre. The effect was so minuscule that it took the most sophisticated instruments on Earth to detect it. The day had lengthened, but not by seconds. Not by milliseconds. The Earth's rotation had slowed by 0.06 microseconds. You heard that right. A microsecond is 1/1,000,000th of a second. And the dam had stretched the day longer by only a fraction of that incomprehensibly small unit of time. But this wasn't a measurement error. This wasn't scientists grasping at straws. The physics was solid, the data was consistent, and the implications were staggering. Humanity had built something so massive that it had measurably, albeit infinitesimally, changed how fast the planet rotates. Think about what that means. You exist on a planet that has been spinning at essentially the same rate for billions of years, governed by the moon's gravitational pull and the friction of tides. Yet a single structure, built over the course of 13 years by human beings, had altered that rate. The sheer audacity of that reality is almost incomprehensible. And it wasn't just about the numbers. It was about what those numbers represented. Scientists could now point to a specific location on Earth and say, here, at this exact spot, humans changed the planet's rotation. Not metaphorically, literally. The mass of water, 39.3 trillion cubic meters of it, sitting 375 feet higher than it would have naturally, had redistributed Earth's moment of inertia just enough to slow the planet's spin. This was no longer theoretical physics. This was proof that humanity had reached a threshold. We had become powerful enough to reshape not just landscapes, but the mechanics of the planet itself. We could measure our impact on Earth's fundamental properties. But the Three Gorges Dam wasn't built to be a physics experiment. It was built for power, for water control, for regional dominance. And understanding why China built it, what they were willing to sacrifice to construct it, is where this story becomes truly disturbing. The price of planetary engineering. When China decided to build the Three Gorges Dam, they didn't announce it as a physics experiment. They announced it as progress. They announced it as energy independence. They announced it as the future of China's economic dominance. And to achieve that future, they were willing to displace 1.3 million people. You heard that right. 1.3 million human beings were forced to relocate. Imagine an entire city the size of Los Angeles being erased from the map. Imagine every person you know, every person they know, having to abandon their homes, their farms, their ancestral lands because a government decided that the land needed to be flooded. That's the scale of human displacement the Three Gorges Dam required. Entire towns vanished beneath the rising water. Archaeological sites that had stood for centuries were submerged. Graves were excavated so families could relocate their ancestors' remains. Farmers watched as the land their families had worked for generations disappeared under 375 feet of water. Some were given compensation. Most felt it was inadequate. Many were simply forgotten, absorbed into crowded cities where they had no skills, no connections, and no way to rebuild their lives. But the human cost wasn't the only cost. The environmental devastation was equally staggering. The reservoir disrupted fish migration patterns for species that had evolved over millions of years to navigate the Yangtze River. Ancient ecosystems collapsed. Biodiversity plummeted in the region. And then there was the methane. As vegetation decomposed underwater, it released methane, a greenhouse gas 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. The dam that was supposed to provide clean energy was inadvertently contributing to climate change through massive methane emissions. Then came the geopolitical nightmare. The Three Gorges Dam doesn't just control water, it controls power over an entire region. China now holds the ability to regulate water flow to Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. During droughts, China can restrict water. During monsoons, China can release it. This gives China unprecedented leverage over downstream nations that depend on the Yangtze River for agriculture, fishing, and drinking water. It's not just infrastructure, it's a weapon disguised as progress. Vietnam has watched its Mekong Delta, the region that feeds the entire country, shrink and degrade because of Chinese water management. Cambodia's fisheries have collapsed. The geopolitical tensions have festered for years, with downstream nations protesting China's control while being powerless to stop it. China built the dam for energy and profit. But what they really built was regional dominance masked by engineering achievement. And it wasn't just the immediate region that suffered. The construction itself triggered something unexpected, something that revealed just how fragile the geological stability of the area actually was. The earthquake problem. Nobody wanted to admit. Here's what China's government didn't want the world to know. The Three Gorges Dam caused earthquakes, not small tremors that you'd barely notice. Actual, measurable seismic events that scientists could track and analyze. The mechanism is called reservoir-induced seismicity. When you add 39.3 trillion cubic meters of water to a location, you increase the weight and pressure on the underlying rock formations. You're essentially adding trillions of tons of mass to a specific point on Earth's crust. The rock beneath the dam hasn't evolved to handle this kind of pressure. It fractures, it shifts, and those shifts register on seismographs as earthquakes. Between 2006 and 2009, scientists recorded over 4,000 earthquakes in the Three Gorges region. 4,000. Most were minor, barely noticeable to people living nearby. But some were significant. In 2008, a magnitude 5.1 earthquake struck the region, strong enough to cause real damage and genuine fear among residents. And here's what made it worse. They couldn't have predicted it. They couldn't have stopped it. They could only watch as their engineering project triggered geological instability. The Chinese government initially denied the connection, but the data was undeniable. Every major earthquake cluster correlated with the filling of the reservoir. Scientists from around the world confirmed it. The dam was literally shaking the earth beneath it, a secondary consequence that engineers hadn't fully anticipated when they were designing the structure. But even this wasn't the most disturbing aspect of what the dam had unleashed. Because while geologists were studying the earthquakes, physicists were discovering something far more profound, that moving water around had altered the actual spin of the planet. And that realization forced the world to confront a terrifying question. What happens when humanity's engineering reaches planetary scale? What happens when we build structures so massive that they reshape the fundamental mechanics of Earth itself? The answer would reshape how scientists thought about human impact on the planet forever. When humans reshape the planet. You need to sit with this for a moment. Humanity has reached a threshold that previous generations couldn't even imagine. We have become so technologically advanced, so capable of moving earth and water and concrete, that we can now measurably alter the rotation of the planet itself, not in some distant theoretical way, not in some way that requires magical thinking or science fiction, in a way that scientists can measure with atomic clocks and satellite data. The Three Gorges Dam is the physical manifestation of that power. It's not just a structure that generates electricity or controls water. It's proof that human engineering has achieved planetary scale. When those engineers poured the last sections of concrete and sealed the reservoir, they didn't just change the landscape. They changed the planet's moment of inertia. They stretched the day by microseconds. They proved that we, humans, could reshape the fundamental mechanics of Earth. But here's what makes this even more unsettling. The Three Gorges Dam might not be the largest such effect we've created. Scientists have calculated that the accumulation of water in reservoirs around the world, all the dams, all the artificial lakes, all the human-engineered water systems, has collectively altered Earth's rotation more significantly than any single project. We've been doing this without fully understanding the consequences. We've been moving water around the planet for over a century, and only recently have we developed the tools to measure the impact. This forces you to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality. When you dam a river, you're not just controlling water flow, you're participating in planetary engineering. When you build a reservoir, you're not just creating a power source, you're altering how fast the Earth spins. Every major dam, every massive water project, every effort to harness water for human purposes carries this hidden cost, a cost measured in microseconds of planetary rotation, but a cost nonetheless. China didn't set out to conduct a planetary physics experiment. They set out to solve an energy crisis. They needed power for their rapidly growing economy. They needed water management for their massive population. They needed to modernize their infrastructure. And in pursuit of those goals, they built something so massive that it changed how the planet rotates. It's almost poetic in its tragedy. The pursuit of progress creating consequences that we're only now beginning to understand. But the Three Gorges Dam represents something even more significant than the physics of it all. It represents China's willingness to reshape geography itself in pursuit of national goals. It represents the mindset that nothing is too big, nothing is too ambitious, nothing is off limits if it serves the state's interests. The dam displaced 1.3 million people. It destroyed ecosystems that had existed for millennia. It triggered thousands of earthquakes. It gave China geopolitical leverage over entire regions. And it did all of this while remaining, in the eyes of many Chinese citizens and government officials, a triumph of human achievement. That contradiction between the genuine engineering marvel and the genuine human suffering it caused is the real story here. The Three Gorges Dam isn't just about altering Earth's rotation. It's about what we're willing to sacrifice in the name of progress. It's about the costs we ignore when we're dazzled by the scale of our own ambition. And it's about what comes next. Because if China built something this massive, something capable of altering planetary mechanics, what will they build in the future? What other geographic reshaping projects are already in development? What other consequences are we not yet equipped to measure? The Three Gorges Dam changed how fast the planet spins, but it also changed something more fundamental. It revealed humanity's capacity to reshape the world at scales we're only beginning to understand. The cost of ambition. When you stand back and look at what China accomplished with the Three Gorges Dam, you have to acknowledge something uncomfortable. It's extraordinary. The engineering is extraordinary. The scale is extraordinary. The audacity of envisioning this project and then actually completing it, that's extraordinary. But extraordinary achievement always comes with a price. And in this case, the price was paid by people who had no choice in the matter. 1.3 million people were told to leave their homes. Not asked, told. The Chinese government initiated what they called resettlement programs. But for the people living in the Three Gorges region, it was displacement. It was erasure. Families that had lived in the same villages for centuries were suddenly told that their land would be underwater. Some received compensation. Most felt it was inadequate. Some received nothing at all, except a directive to leave. But it wasn't just about money or relocation. These were communities with deep cultural roots, with history stretching back generations. Archaeological sites containing artifacts thousands of years old were submerged. Temples were flooded. Cemeteries had to be evacuated, with families forced to dig up their ancestors' remains and move them to unfamiliar ground. Try to imagine that happening to your family, your community, your identity. Try to imagine the government telling you that your ancestral homeland would cease to exist so that they could build something they deemed more important. Then came the environmental reckoning. The reservoir transformed the ecosystem of the entire region. Species of fish that had navigated the Yangtze River for millions of years suddenly faced an insurmountable obstacle. Their migration patterns were disrupted. Their breeding grounds disappeared. The biodiversity of the region collapsed. Scientists documented species extinction in real time, creatures that had survived ice ages and continental shifts eliminated by one human-built structure. But perhaps the most insidious environmental consequence was the methane. As vegetation decomposed beneath hundreds of feet of water, it released massive quantities of methane into the atmosphere. The dam that was supposed to provide clean energy that would replace fossil fuel burning, was inadvertently creating a greenhouse gas emission problem of its own. It's a bitter irony. In pursuing clean power, China created an environmental problem that offset some of the benefits of that clean power. And then there was the geopolitical dimension that nobody wanted to discuss openly. By controlling the Three Gorges Dam, China gained control over water flow to an entire region. Vietnam depends on the Mekong Delta, an agricultural region fed by the Yangtze River, to feed its entire population. Cambodia's fishing industry relies on stable water levels. Laos depends on the river for hydroelectric power and transportation. By building the Three Gorges Dam, China didn't just create a power source. It created leverage. It created dependency. It created a weapon that could be deployed through water management without firing a single shot. When drought strikes Southeast Asia, China decides how much water to release. When monsoons threaten flooding, China decides how to manage the flow. Vietnam has watched its Mekong Delta deteriorate over the past 15 years, and much of that deterioration can be traced back to upstream Chinese water management decisions. The tensions have festered in silence, because what can a downstream nation do against an upstream superpower? They have no choice but to accept whatever water management policies China implements. This is what planetary scale engineering really means. It's not just about altering Earth's rotation or moving incomprehensible volumes of water. It's about power. It's about the capacity to reshape geography in ways that benefit one nation at the expense of others. It's about using engineering as a tool of geopolitical dominance. And it wasn't just the downstream nations that suffered. The very ground beneath the dam itself became unstable. The final reckoning. You've learned how China built a dam so massive it altered Earth's rotation. You've seen the engineering triumph and the human cost. But there's one final dimension to this story, the moment when scientists fully grasped what humanity had actually accomplished. In 2011, when that geophysics study confirmed the Three Gorges Dam had measurably slowed Earth's rotation, something shifted. This wasn't a prediction. This was proof. Scientists could now point to a specific location on Earth and say, "Here, humans changed how fast the world spins." But here's what really unsettled them. The Three Gorges Dam might not even be the largest such effect. When researchers analyzed all the major reservoirs worldwide, they realized we'd been reshaping Earth's rotation all along. We just didn't have the tools to measure it until now. We'd been conducting a planetary experiment without knowing it. Humanity has become a planetary force. We're no longer just inhabitants of Earth. We're engineers, reshaping it. We're moving water, altering landscapes, redistributing mass in ways that measurably affect how the planet rotates. We've reached a level of technological capability that defies comprehension. And China understands this better than anyone. The Three Gorges Dam was part of a larger vision, reshaping geography itself to serve national interests. China has since pursued even more ambitious megaprojects, each one operating at planetary scale, each one measurably altering Earth's systems. The Three Gorges Dam displaced 1.3 million people. It triggered thousands of earthquakes. It destroyed ancient ecosystems. It released massive quantities of methane. It gave China geopolitical leverage over entire regions. And it slowed the rotation of the planet itself. But here's what's truly disturbing. We're only now developing the tools to measure these effects. We've been reshaping the planet for decades without fully understanding the consequences. As our capability grows exponentially, we're going to reshape the world in even more dramatic ways. You started wondering how one dam could slow Earth's rotation. But the real question is this: what happens when we build the next one? Because China just proved we have the capability. They proved it by slowing down the planet itself.